Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, September 6th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Arkansas State game is in 4 days, the game against Michigan in 81 days. Before we get too far into the actual topic of today's show, I did want to share a quick update on the status of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Monday, Ryan Day was on BTN and said, quote, "It's not a long-term thing, and we'll evaluate him throughout the week and hope to have him on Saturday." And that's the end of the Ryan Day quote. Here's my little take on this, based on previous history of the guys with little dings before games against opponents like Arkansas State. You may not see him for another week, but for now it sounds like there's nothing to panic over. So hopefully that's a little good news for you at the start of your work week. All right, now, on with the actual topic of today's show. The Notre Dame game was a big one on the field, but it was also a huge one for the future of the Ohio State program and recruiting. The Buckeyes brought in dozens of top recruits for the 2023, 2024, 2025 classes, and then delivered quite an environment for those players to experience. Now the question is whether that's going to translate into commitments. My guest today is Alex Gleitman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Alex, between the crowd and the win and some of the big names there, including LeBron James and Chase Young and Ezekiel Elliott, many, many more, it felt like you really couldn't ask for much more out of a game weekend to have all those guys visiting for.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know fans probably feel a little bit differently because for 2.5 quarters, they were near heart attack condition, but you really couldn't have asked for a better game if you are working the Ohio State recruiting department. You had LeBron James there. You had Jason Tatum there. You had Andre Iguodala and Evan Turner and some other, D'Angelo Russell was there. And then obviously all the old Ohio State guys, coming back from the NFL, the Zeke Elliott's, the Chase Youngs, Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Joe Burrow. LSU fans maybe not so happy about that one, but Joe Burrow was there rooting for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And you add that all in, it's a night game. The crowd's always a little bit louder and more into it in a night game. And then on top of that, it was a close game, and Ohio State comes back and wins, showing off this awesome new defense that they have. I mean, I don't think anyone who watched, yes, Ohio State's offense struggled, but I think if you watched Ohio State the last few years under Ryan Day, I don't think you should have any concerns about offense moving forward. It was really all about the defense, and the defense balled out, and it's just the excitement around this team. I know it didn't go the way that everyone thought it would, but beating a top 5 team at home in front of a packed house, over 106,000 fans, with all those people in attendance, the primetime game, the marquee game, maybe of the college football season as far as the non-conference slate goes, and it was just a smashing success for Ohio State on the recruiting front, at least.
Well, last week we talked about 3 very, very big-time defensive linemen who were visiting in that 2023 class: Keon Keeley, Mateo Uiagalelei, and Damon Wilson. Now, how much did this weekend do to either shift things towards Ohio State with those guys? Did it help close the deal with someone? Where do things stand with those 3 guys? Because we kind of want to follow up on that, all those shows all the talk we had from about them last week.
Yeah, I was talking about those guys in my sleep. It felt like we were talking about them so much. I don't want to give away too much because Mark wrote a little bit about them in his Skull Session column on BuckeyeHuddle.com, and I'm going to be dropping my A-Deck column on Tuesday as well with some more inside information. But I think the overarching summary is it was very positive for all 3 of those guys. I think Damon Wilson is a kid who may be making a decision sometime this month. It could happen within the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia, and I think Ohio State absolutely put their best foot forward. This was his 2nd visit of the year. He took an unofficial visit in the spring. So this was their step up to the plate and try to hit a walk-off home run type of thing. And I think that they did a really good job there. He doesn't really tip his hand too well, but I think Ohio State has a much better chance than I thought they maybe did coming into the weekend from everything I've heard. Now, let's let the visit highs wear off a little bit because we've seen, some kids get really excited and talk a big game and then do some other things later on. But I think things are trending in a positive direction for Damon Wilson. I'd say Mateo Uiagalelei, without giving away too much, I had Ohio State as the leader coming into the trip. And I think obviously a visit like this just solidified the Buckeyes as the leader. But Alabama, official visit remaining. USC, right in his backyard in California. And Oregon is another West Coast school who's in this recruitment. So I think there's a little bit to go in this one, but you have to like where Ohio State's positioned. And then Keon Keeley, all I'll say, and I want people to read the A-Deck, I want people to read the Skull Session, I think Ohio State has a real chance here. I think they did a lot to help themselves this weekend. Push comes to shove. I mean, we've been talking about this. This is no secret. It's going to come down to what's most important to him. Is the culture he's looking for and scheme and position fit, history of putting 4-3 defensive ends in the NFL, is that going to be most important to him, or some other factors? Alabama, you can't argue it. If you want to win a national championship, that is the best place to go. Now, Ohio State, Georgia, maybe a couple others do give you an opportunity to win one. Alabama's there. And, NIL, from that perspective, I can't really speak to what Alabama's doing a ton. I know Ohio State isn't doing the whole, we're going to guarantee you X amount of millions of dollars before you come here. But look, proof of concept, we're showing you what our players are doing and making and so on. But some of those SEC schools and other schools across the country that are in on the Keon Keeley recruitment are doing some of those things. So is that important to him? Is it not? I don't know. That's really what I'll leave it at, and I'll have a lot more in the A deck for our subscribers to read.
Yeah, and he mentioned Skull Session. That's Mark Givler's weekly recruiting column. He does the A deck column. The only place you can find those is on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You have to be a member to access all that kind of stuff. We will generally give you a pretty good sense of things on these shows, on these YouTube shows and podcasts. But the true inside stuff, a lot of times we'll talk about 3 guys from a weekend, and then there's 15 guys in Alex's report on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So if this is all interesting stuff to you and you're like, I wish he would say more, well, he does say more, but you have to go somewhere else to get it. It's at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up for membership today. It is $12.99 a month, which is really nothing in the big picture, and that'll get you a month worth of Buckeye Huddle. And then if you like it, great, you can sign up for a full year and get the discounted rate of $124.99 for a year. So, okay, sales pitch over. Show continuing now. One of the 2024 names we've discussed before was KJ Bolden. He is listed as an athlete right now. We've talked about him a little bit last week as well, so I wanted to follow up on him as well. He's ranked as a top 5 player overall in the class. He was in Columbus over the weekend. Did this weekend move the needle with him at all?
I think it absolutely did. I mean, I think Ohio State was in a good spot coming into this trip. Georgia, the home state school, is really tough to beat always for a Georgia kid or a kid in that southeast region. Alabama's going to come after him. Florida's going to come after him. All those big-time SEC schools down in that region are going to come after KJ Bolden. But Ohio State has established themselves as a top contender in this recruitment from the first time he stepped on campus. I think they've done a tremendous job recruiting him. They do a tremendous job recruiting that Buford High School, which is where Harry Miller came from. Obviously, things didn't work out on the field for Harry Miller the way we all thought, but I think the way that Ryan Day and Ohio State have handled the situation with Harry has only cemented their standing in that Buford community even further than it already, more positively than it already was. So Ohio State's got a great reputation down there. They have a great relationship with KJ Bolden. He obviously got to see a tremendous defensive performance. This Jim Knowles scheme, they've been telling him about it. Perry Eliano, Tim Walton have been recruiting them. They've been telling him about it. And he got to see, I mean, if you watch the game, I didn't see a ton from Tanner McAllister. I'm sure he did a nice job, which is actually probably good that we didn't hear him too much because he's kind of that nickel back coverage guy. But Ronnie Hickman, Lathan Ransom were plenty active in that game. I thought they both had great games. And KJ Bolden being able to see himself kind of play maybe that Lathan Ransom role, that had to have been really impactful. And I spoke to him. He had a tremendous time. And I think Ohio State, I don't want to call them the team to beat right now, but I think that them in Georgia, this is going to be a dogfight to the end.
Yeah, Jim Knowles always talks about this as being a safety-driven defense, but until Saturday night, it was all kind of like you can say lots of stuff and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Now you're having recruits there in person to maybe see some sort of proof of concept in firsthand. That definitely seems like something that might help with recruiting guys on defense moving forward. Is there one more guy who you'd point to as someone who is either someone you'd have on commitment watch right now or someone who at least saw his chances of ending up at Ohio State significantly change one way or the other this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple kids. I don't want to say that they significantly changed because I feel like they were in a good spot, obviously, coming in. But I'd say the offensive lineman, Ian Moore, out of Indiana. I think Ohio State really opened his eyes. I think it's going to be a Big Ten regional battle. Wisconsin, Iowa are two schools in the Big Ten that produce amazing offensive linemen. I think they're probably the two schools that Ohio State's up against here for the Indiana native. And I just think, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'll say I wouldn't be shocked within the next month if Ian Moore ends up a Buckeye. And I think this visit, to your point, is maybe what kind of pushed him over the edge a little bit.
Well, we always talk about recruiting being about comfort and relationships, and you talked to a ton of current commits and other guys who were just visiting over the weekend. And reading through reporting on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com, there's another plug for it. It was really interesting to see the guys who talked about how they hadn't necessarily met other guys who were in the recruiting class. Current commits hadn't necessarily ever met all of their future teammates in person until this weekend. So how big is a weekend like this in terms of solidifying your class and then, just starting to continue to build those relationships between those guys in the class?
Yeah, well, I mean, usually a lot of schools like to try to have one of their official visit weekends in the summer be where like all of their current commits kind of go on that same weekend. Now, obviously there's guys in the class who weren't in the class coming into the summer, so you have that factor. And then schedules. I mean, sometimes guys just can't make it, or you're going to have a bunch of uncommitted guys that can make it a certain weekend because there's only so many weekends where you can have those official visits. So it just didn't work out that way. There was actually basically 3 different weekends where those guys were on campus this past summer, maybe even 4 if I go back and look. So this was an opportunity to get, I think they had, out of like the 22 or whatever they have in the class right now, 21 or 22, I'm blanking. But they probably, I think, had 17 or so of those guys on campus. And the ones who couldn't make it had games, I think, on Saturday. And that's why they couldn't make it. So to get all those guys together, kind of build that camaraderie, build those relationships, I think it only makes them stronger commitments to Ohio State. Obviously, you put on a performance like that. Some of the guys who maybe were wavering a little bit, or I shouldn't say wavering, but that you're a little bit nervous about, a Mark Fletcher. You get to see Mayan Williams put on that type of show as a big physical back yourself. That has to excite you. Jelani Thurman. I thought Ohio State had Cade Stover very active in the game plan. He caught a few passes, I think maybe targeted on a couple others. Obviously very active in the passing game and things along those lines. The run game in blocking and things along those lines. So, some of those guys that maybe you were a little bit nervous about, getting them to bond with their teammates, show them a little bit on the field about how they could be used. I think it was great. And then on top of that, you had a few uncommitted guys in that 2023 class, some 2024 guys, big time prospects, and having the committed guys on campus to help recruit them as an extension of the staff is invaluable. So awesome weekend in that regard for the 2023 class.
All right, so that's the end of our football talk on this show. You can find a lot more in Alex's ADEC column later this week on the BuckeyeHuddle.com website on the Huddle board. That is a members-only site, or members-only board. So make sure you sign up today to get the rest of the inside information on this weekend's visitors. Did want to before we let you go, touch on basketball recruiting just a little bit. We don't have nearly as much there, but there was a decommitment this weekend. And now you're starting to get some vibes that there could be another guy on the way. That empty spot in this 2023 class for Chris Holtmann might not be an empty spot for very long.
Yeah, George Washington III. He's been a long time commit. He was actually, I think he was the first guy in this class actually of the 4 that they had committed. It was surprising to me when I saw that tweet come out. Especially, I think they had him on campus this weekend. I believe he was with all the other commits. Everything seemed great, and for whatever reason, he decided to open things up, and you start to think about what could those, for whatever reasons, be. And Ohio State did happen to have another prospect on campus. They had Tayson Chapman, a combo guard from Minneapolis, 6'4", about 175 pounds, similar type player to George Washington. They had him on campus. By all accounts, he had a great time. It's Kansas, Ohio State, Xavier, Minnesota, and Virginia. He took official visits to Xavier and Kansas in the summer. Did not commit, which is huge in basketball because a lot of times you get those quick commits after the official visits. He did take the Ohio State official visit this weekend, was on campus with Scotty Middleton, Austin Parks, Devin Royal, all those guys. And, I mean, look, nothing's done yet, but it certainly seems like they had a good time. And talking to a couple people that I know connected to the basketball program, there's cautious optimism that they can land Tayson Chapman. So those two things might be a little bit connected. And then on top of that, the guy that everyone had their eyes on all night was Bronny James, oldest son of LeBron James. He was on campus. Now, there's a lot of questions. How interested is he in actually playing college basketball? Is he going to go to the G League? Is he going to go to overseas somewhere? What is he going to do? But if he goes to college, I mean, Ohio State, LeBron, that's where he said he always wanted to go, right? The only college visit that has been recorded to date is Bronny James going to Ohio State. Now, this was maybe just an opportunity to see a tremendous football game for a team he grew up watching, but there's no doubt he got to spend time with Chris Holtmann, the staff, those other commitments, and if Bronny James wants to come to Ohio State, they're going to find a spot for him. So I don't think the George Washington news is as much indicative of maybe Bronny James joining this class as it maybe is Tayson Chapman joining this class, which I think George Washington is a tremendous player. Would love Ohio State to actually have both of those guys. But from a rankings perspective, Tayson Chapman is ranked as the number 31 player in the country. So if you're at home a little bit disappointed that Ohio State lost a big-time basketball commitment in George Washington, who's a top 100 player, they may get a top 35 player in Tayson Chapman.
So it should be a busy fall covering basketball recruiting, apparently, and also, of course, football recruiting as we talked a bunch of 2023s. Some of that could go down to the December early signing day deadline, or possibly even February. Or hearing one of those defensive line ends that Alex talked about has been talked about as potentially a February guy. So this could be a drama-filled fall on the recruiting front, and that doesn't even get into the 24s and the 25s. What a great place to enjoy all of that drama, soak it up, roll around in it. Then the BuckeyeHuddle.com website, the Huddle Board, our team of insiders covering recruiting, Mark Givler and Alex covering the recruiting piece of things, Kevin Noon, Tony Gerderman, and I covering the team, and then, of course, our wonderful X's and O's gurus, Justin Whitlatch, Devin Radcliffe, and, of course, Ross Fulton. They're all there. We're all there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Why aren't you there? You should be there. You should be there right now. So go ahead and sign up today at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.